Good morning, everybody. I guess I'll start briefly by stating that a very, very difficult decision yesterday. I met with Bruce in the afternoon, both professionally and personally. I want to thank he and his family, Julie and Cole and Shannon, for what they've really done, both on and off the ice for the Boston Bruins, the organization, and again a really tough day overall, but had to make a decision that I felt in the best interest of where our team is at now and moving forward, and I'd be happy to answer your questions.
I guess why now? What about where the team is now? Did you feel like this was the right time to do this?
The timing after taking a few weeks to unpack, a lot of things happened over the course of the year. And where I thought the direction of our team was currently, and equally, with some of the surgeries and some of the things coming out, where our team was going to be going forward and impacting our club. I just felt that the messaging and the voice that was going to be required, I felt we needed a new direction. And I'd met with the coaching staff like I normally do to go over not only the year and their feeling of where our team was, what we were capable of achieving. And then I met with Bruce afterwards as well, talking about his staff. At that point in time, he had made a decision that Kevin Dean wasn't going to be extended. We had talks during the course of the year about he and Kevin and their relationship, and everybody was aware that there was a little friction there at some point in time. They got past that and went back to work as both of them as professionals, and I think have a long history. And then I just went back to work and talking with our group, be it scouts, management, certainly in ownership, and just made a clear decision that I needed a change, and that's where I arrived yesterday afternoon.
What's the feedback from your players lead to this decision?
We've gone through exit meetings. I've done it at every level. They're not driving the bus in terms of making my decisions. I honestly believe that they have they impact our hockey club more than any of us. They're invested, and I think they want to know how invested the organization is. I think to take anything away from what they're trying to accomplish as a group, I honestly believe that it doesn't matter what they're necessarily saying individually. It's collectively as a group and to how much they think they can accomplish. And they agreed with me because I had used a statement that we had left something on the table, and they felt the same way. Young or old, I think there's a message delivery that I think a new voice will resonate with them.
As a group, were they disgruntled?
Disgruntled with coaching staff?
You say they come not to the group consensus, but as a group, were they disgruntled with Bruce?
No, I don't think that's the overriding. I think they think like I do that Bruce is a terrific coach, and I think that he'll have tremendous amount of success as he did here, in his next opportunity. And I think every player would agree with that. He's a terrific coach.
So going forward, where does he fall short in terms of where your team is today? Because ultimately, that's a decision, right?
Yeah, again, I felt that both the message and how it was being delivered, and more importantly, maybe how it was being received, young and old. And that's where I referenced, both younger and older players, and taking ownership of it as I would, and I do with where our roster is at and the changes that I, ultimately have to make. And I think the players, felt that we're very well prepared. But at times, young and old, they struggle, and sometimes that's the voice that's in their head. And, I think ultimately they had to make a decision that takes us in a different path.
A lot of fans are surprised and upset about this decision. Did you anticipate that kind of reaction?
Well, if you go back, when I promoted Bruce, I think there was a similar reaction. And I expected it then, I expected it today. It's not a comfortable position to be in when you've got a popular coach, both publicly and the amount of success he's had. yeah, it's going to be an unpopular decision, and it's not going to resonate, and it didn't sit well with me. Very difficult decision, as I referenced, both personally and professionally, but, you know, the rhetoric behind, you know, at times you hear about, you know, the Bruins organization, the Jacobs family about being, you know, uninvested owners and absentee owners is so far from the truth. You know, they are very present. You know, and when I go to write plans in front of both Cam and Charlie and Mr. Jacobs and that organization, you know, they expect, you know, as I referenced, you know, a few weeks ago, holding to a standard of best in class. And Bruce has been a part of a lot of success we've had. So, yeah, I believe the fans were going to be, you know, upset. And it's incumbent upon me to make the right decisions. Both personal decisions, personnel decisions, as well as staff decisions, and that's ultimately what I'm going to try and continue to do.
Would ownership have any feedback on Bruce?
I make my recommendations. I've spoken to them over the period of time, and made my recommendations as to where I was leaning. You know, a few weeks ago, I took last week with the combine, and then ultimately came back over the weekend and made my final recommendation and got their support.
Bruce could be, you know, pretty candid and pretty critical even publicly at times. Was that part of the difficulty, just receiving the message, or, you know, with the players, things like that? Was that part of the issue?
I think Bruce is very honest. He answers a question honestly, articulately. I'd say that the vast majority of those times, Bruce would have said the players have heard that same message before he's delivered publicly. And I think he's stuck to that. I don't think any players necessarily be caught off guard. You know, nobody necessarily, as I referenced a few weeks ago, the constructive criticism, you know, the word criticism most of the time what people hear, and sometimes it's not easy, and he just wants to make sure he's clear and direct in his messaging and not contradictory.
Do you think it's realistic for the next guy to take this group further, or is this more like 15, 16, where it might be like a sort of soft rebuild?
Good question. I feel that where our group, what we were able to accomplish during the year in the bulk of January, February, March, is a good hockey team. Now, that being said, with the injuries that we have and where the players come back health-wise, that could dictate that. And the start that we get off to may dictate that. You know, our goaltending, I expect, made some headway throughout the year, and I think that's hopefully going to continue if they put forth the investment and, you know, in Sway's case, maturity and experience that he's going to gain. I think our defense, albeit needs to get healthy, as a group, is pretty strong. You know, the question looms with Bergeron. You know, that's the question in terms of, you know, when you talk about bringing back similar type of roster, that he's a big part of that. And, you know, I still have to wait for that decision. I don't have any clarity on that as I stand here today. So I'm not going to fully answer the question because I don't have that answer as I sit. Now, we are going to take a shift, not unlike in 15, where we instituted some younger players and we have to continue to do a good job of that when they're ready. You know, putting players in when they're not ready, it's not going to help anybody. You know, these guys want to win. We've done a pretty good job over the course of that time period to reference of being very competitive. We just didn't get it done. You know, in 19 we were close, and we've been close. I just didn't think we played our best hockey that we were capable of playing against Carolina, and I don't take anything away from Carolina and what they accomplished. And I would think they'd say the same thing against the Rangers, you know, to drop a Game 7.
You mentioned ownership. Do you think that they would accept if a small step back is taken, just given where the team was last year? If they're a little worse, if it's a wild card, if it's a fringe wild card, it's a first round exit, whatever it may be, do you think that you can do your job towards a rebuild and keep it?
Yeah, my job relative to keeping it, I think I've made decisions, whether it be in my last year of my contract or where I'll be in my first year of my contract. It's in the best interest of the Boston Bruins. You know, that's not why I stand up here today to worry about my job. As far as what my recommendations are, you know, they're not caught off guard in any way, shape, or form of the directions that I need to move. You know, I'm well in advance in terms of how I think we are, and injuries are going to be a part of that. But we're a competitive group, and we're going to remain a competitive group. But we may need to infuse at some point in time. If we have the injuries and things that catch up to you that you just can't get out from under, that's a problem. And in the Bergeron, as I referenced, you know, last time I was here, could be a directional shift as well.
We talked about 3 weeks ago, you mentioned discipline, execution. You said Carolina was a hard matchup for you. How does a new coach kind of flip that on its head?
Well, I mean, I'm always process driven. I think the structure of our hockey club, will remain. I do believe coaching, obviously the talent. You watch Edmonton and Colorado get up and down the ice last night. It's a talent driven league, but structure. How you can defend. You look at Tampa and why the success they've had. We're a good club. You're in the top part of the leagues for reasons. Sometimes it depends on where you are in your cycle. Teams have been in a position. I mean, it's the first time Colorado's been in the Stanley Cup Finals for 20 years. They've asked a hell. Joe's done a hell of a job. Chris and Craig Billington, and obviously they got themselves to the doorstep, and other teams are in a similar fashion. We've been a team that's been very competitive, and I want to continue to do that. It may take a time period where, not unlike 15, where we felt that we needed to make some changes in the and where we had several players on long-term deals, and I made some very tough decisions at that point in time, trying to infuse some younger players, and at times we did it well, and other times we fell short. Fully acknowledge that along the path here as well. So we need to continue to do a better job in all those areas. We hope to remain competitive.
What are the qualities that you're looking for in the next coach? What are the most important sort of priorities you're looking for?
Yeah, I'm still going to be a process-driven and structure guy. I do believe that we can continue to evolve, involving our defense. We've been an upper echelon power play and penalty killing team. I think that needs to remain. You're seeing that rear its head in the playoffs. You watch Florida that had a ridiculously good power play during the regular season. It sputtered in the playoffs, and it probably cost them a little bit. So I think those are difference makers, as you're going along. Again, I don't dictate how the league's going to, how the refereeing's going to go, but I think you're seeing a trend in that area that special teams are certainly playing a big part of it. The goaltending's going to be a part of it. So the coach has to have the communication skills to be able to bridge that gap with older and younger players. I think that's paramount now with integration. As I said, in a perfect world, all the players are overcooked or overbaked, which, Kenny Holland and my peer group have used that terminology. And we won't be any different, but I go back, you've asked me about the Lysells of the world, only when they're ready. I mean, David Pasternak's a great example of that a number of years ago. We didn't necessarily believe he was ready, but he came in and scored against Philadelphia, and next thing you know, he's in our lineup for the rest of the year and impactful moving forward. So those will be the challenges that we try and find the balance of development and an infusion of talent. And the new coach is going to have to be able to communicate and bridge that gap from older players and communicating with them and holding them to a standard that I think we'd all feel is necessary. And in this town, it is necessary, to hold a team to a competitive standard. That coach has to walk that walk.
Do you have any candidates in mind or
No.
any prospects?
I have a list of candidates that, but the search is going to take me some time to go through and do my due diligence and continue to talk to our staff and interview, from a wide base and learn about what other people outside the game, how they view our younger players and how they view our team as it is.
What's the status of the assistants right now?
Both Joe and Chris Kelly are under contract. I've had discussion with Bob Asenza, so I'll see where that one lies. As I referenced Kevin Dean, it won't be extended. And no, I mean, I don't categorically say that because I'm going to hire a new head coach, and if he decides he wants to interview Kevin, I know Kevin will be looking at other opportunities elsewhere, but I would leave that up to the head coach. But it's unlikely at this point in time.
And have you agreed to a finalized journal?
I haven't finalized anything. As I referenced, a number of weeks ago, I have an indication, as I've charted a course for this organization, that I'll be back.
Did you get a chance to meet with Bruce yesterday?
I did. Yeah, I met in person with Bruce yesterday afternoon.
How did you take it?
Not well, as I didn't in delivering it. I sat there and said, I'm the same guy that 6 years ago sat with you to believe in you, and I sat there yesterday believing him as an excellent head coach. It's just I made a very difficult decision, and I had to deliver the news as I would in person and discuss some of the things where we both fell short and not getting the job done, and wishing him well with. It's only a matter of when, not a matter of if he has the next opportunity. Sorry.
Did you get the sense that all coaches evolve? but did you get the sense that Bruce was just firm in his way, not evolving from that?
I think Bruce has evolved. I've been working with Bruce for 14 years. I've watched him grow into, and it's the reason why he was hired, 6 years ago, or I promoted him 6 years ago, because I knew what his skill set as a coach was. And as far as evolving, I think his confidence as a head coach and the messaging that he wants to deliver, I think is exactly as he wants it to be. Has it changed with the group that's still here, and as effective with the groups here? That was my determination. Not as effective as it was, but doesn't mean it's going to be less effective somewhere else, because I do believe he's a good coach and he's going to have a similar winning percentage elsewhere.
What would be your message for fans who have lost faith in the front office or don't have that faith right now?
I mean, you can be more specific if you'd like. I think that's a generalization. If you feel that way, then I'm perfectly happy to answer the question. I don't think I've lost faith in myself as a manager. I don't think our winning percentage over the last 7 years that I've been as a general manager would necessarily support that. We haven't won. That's what supports that, and that's why I stand up here today to try and make the necessary changes, and I will. And to answer your question, if I don't, guess what? Somebody else will be standing up here, because I referenced that with the Jacobs family and with Cam. One of the best parts about working for this organization is to be held to that standard, knowing that you have the full latitude to make the recommendations and decisions that you think are right, and then when they're not, they get somebody else. That's as categorically honest as I can possibly be. That's as black and white as it is. To be held to that standard and aspire to be best in class is exactly what you want to be part of. And then, when the decision is made, they just categorically make a business decision and say, this is the best interest of the Boston Bruins, and I might not be part of that.
Off of Scott's question, this is gonna sound kind of jerkish, but why Bruce and not you, Cam, whoever?
It may fall the other way at some point in time. Today, that's not the day. I made a decision as to what my recommendation would be in the change in the course. We have had a good team. We're going to continue to have a good team. Do we have to pivot based on where our injuries are, and maybe it may come, and maybe they make the decision then that I'm not the right guy. As it stands right now, I have the support of the people that I work with and work for, and I'm thankful for that. Didn't make the decision to change the coach because of that. Made the decision because I'd been in the place when I hired Bruce 6 years ago. I'm the same person that stands here today and say, I need to make a change. And as I referenced, the messaging, the direction, and some of the things that aren't resonating as loudly as they did, that's part of the exercise.
So would you say that Bruce quote unquote lost the
No.
moment? Is that?
No. You don't go out and get 107 points, win 51 games if players aren't responding to you. That just doesn't happen. He's able to push the buttons that are necessary. But it takes its toll, over the course of time. It takes its toll. And, you got to find a way to deliver that message a little differently, and or the personnel changes and you cycle it out. That's a little bit of the cycle of, what happens.
You mentioned this is a competitive roster, but you don't have the first round pick, you don't have the 2 seconds. Where do you stand? Are you at the point where you think you need to add futures immediately?
Futures from draft pick standpoint, Pluto? I mean, everybody would like to never trade picks and never necessarily have to give up. You could make lateral trades, but when you get to the deadline, what team trying to win did that? You just have to, you're going to leverage, and you try and spread it out as we did, and then at some point in time, as I referenced, you may have to be in a position where you are going to recoup like we did in 15, and then you hope you do it and execute it, to the nth degree. Like I said, we've done it well, but not well enough, and that's what we, the aspirations are to continue to do it better. So, to answer your question, yeah, I'd certainly like to add, from a future standpoint, and be much deeper and stocked. Chances are, if you've been a team that's been, looking to win and be competitive every year for 15 or so years, you're going to sacrifice some things, and there's going to be a trade-off, and that's exactly what's happened.
So you feel you're at that point then, in terms of you need to make that decision now to recoup those picks?
No, I feel that we have a very competitive team. Am I going to look to make some changes and necessary changes? Absolutely. And part of that will be some of the younger guys that are coming on board and whether or not they can make a difference. And maybe we get a glimpse of that with some of the injuries and the rehabs that we have to go through. And then we did make a decision from there.
What more do you want out of your roster?
I want to win.
Right, but what are the elements of that? Is it, do you think it's a skill? The fact that you can't get out of the first or second round, do you think that's a skill issue, a toughness issue? Where are we falling short in this roster?
I think it's both. I think it's, playing with a little bit more pace, and maybe that's in the bottom six. I think we were well equipped depth wise, but when certain players go through their challenges, other guys were they able to step up, or did we stuck with the group? And that's on me. And you guys asked me the same question, whether I should have continued to add at the deadline, and likely should have. Didn't necessarily say it was possible, or to the large point of leveraging even further, then maybe not. But finding that balance of youth and infusion and pace of our game and playing to that standard, getting a little bit more. And the war of attrition is a big part of this. I mean, nobody, would have thought that Lindholm and McAvoy, would both have gotten injured in that first round series, but they did. So, it does take its toll. The previous year, we lost our right side. So history would tell me we better be well equipped on the back end when you're going into the playoffs in order to get through. It's just seemingly where things where injuries amount for us. So we have to be well balanced to take a run. You just do.
Was there any concern that this decision might tip the scales as far as Bergeron and his decision-making, and just maybe not wanting to play for a new coach at this point in his career or anything like that?
No, I mean, I've had, multiple conversations with Patrice about this organization over the course of my time here. I continue to have them. He has too much respect for Bruce or for me or anybody to make recommendation about, the coaches and who he's going to play with. Went through the same thing with Claude, who he played, and had a lot of success with, and it's more out of respect that he is. And in my conversations with him yesterday, I did not ask, whether this impacts his decision. It's Bergie's decision. In his timeline, he referenced it when, during his acceptance of the Selke.
Are you working on anything with Pasternak, and if Bergeron or potentially Krejci doesn't come, does that at all affect whether you go in the direction of him being how you potentially recoup some picks?
Well, we can't have a discussion with David until the calendar year flips over on the 13th. So, but I've said all along that I will attack that one as I have with all of our players that we've looked to go longer term on right away, and see where it goes. David has a decision making that in that same vein, and he might be sitting back and balancing the same way with whether it's Patrice or anybody else that we're adding. So, those conversations will come to light, and I'll have to make a decision based on the information that I get.
Is using any the buyout option?
Not today, I don't. Not when I sit here today. Could change, but no.
And have you had any more discussions with Krejci or any of his people?
No, I've had a discussion with David's people. David has flown back to South Carolina, and I expect at some point in time that we'll communicate.
If this is a 15 situation, you do need to recruit picks. What is your faith in the front office and the scouting staff to use those picks in a way that does restock the system?
I mean, there's been a tremendous amount of rhetoric. You want to ask the obvious question whether or not we failed in 2015 to knock it out of the park in our draft, then go ahead and ask. I mean, it's not like I haven't been addressed it before. The draft is what it is. You try and do the absolute best job you possibly can. I think that we have several players that have certainly turned into really good NHL players. I don't believe that we executed it to the level we were capable of. So you need to continue to do it better. In subsequent drafts we have, at times, and other drafts we haven't. That's a little bit of the variance that's associated with drafting 18-year-old kids, and doesn't put any of the onus elsewhere except on us to continue to look to do it, to the best of our abilities. And I'm sure every team feels the exact same way.
Best case scenario, do you see this team as a cup contender next year?
Yeah, best case, it has to be healthy, and that's a little bit of a variance where I stand here today. You know, I mean, wasn't sure that, you know, I referenced that Marsh was going in for MRIs. You know, we didn't have the information a few weeks ago that he was having his hips done, and certainly that Charlie was going to have his shoulder done. You know, we knew on Grizz, and Mike Riley's a little more of a maintenance thing, and Bergeron's was a maintenance thing. How they come out of it and where they get back into the lineup may determine that ultimately. But they're really good players, and I expect they will relaunch themselves back to the same level that they're capable of, which would indicate that we're going to be a really strong team again, if I can do some things this summer.
Don, your press release talked about needing a new voice with firing Bruce Cassidy. You're the one that constructed the team. Will a new voice make a difference if you're still here calling shots?
Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, that's the intention of you know, when you put together a team over the course of time, you've had some success. I think you should take some comfort in the fact that you've made some good decisions in that regard. Maybe not to the same level of the team that's won, and that's what you hold yourself, you know, to that standard. I think that exact same rhetoric was in place when I promoted Bruce. And I would say it's going to remain until the next coach comes in here and does what I hope he's capable of doing with the group of players that we have. So the answer will be in what our record is and what our accomplishments are. And maybe you'll have a chance to ask the next guy that.
Does the next candidate, would you like them to have had NHL experience? Why a veteran NHL coach? Can it be somebody that, you know, maybe comes from college or doesn't have, you know, the NHL experience? Open-minded?
Well, I'm certainly going to be open-minded. I'm going to cast the net a little wider, and I don't think it's an absolute prerequisite. You know, as I said, we've got an experienced group of guys that you know, want to win, know how to win, and a young group of guys as the next core. You know, Charlie and David, you know, being part of that hopefully can bridge and continue to bridge what the next young group of guys are going to come in. Now the coach needs to direct that ship and be able to communicate effectively across all those age groups, and that's what I certainly want to make sure I cast the net wide enough. I don't believe it's an absolute prerequisite to have coached behind the NHL bench. You know.
Time for a couple more. There aren't. Reference McAvoy and Lindholm being injured. You mentioned the war of attrition with injuries. Again, sort of having a hard time connecting how that relates to the coach. I mean, what can a coach do to prevent these things from happening? Because it does seem that sort of random injuries and whatnot.
I guess what was the connection I made with the injuries to McAvoy?
That was a big problem with your team, you know, this year. How is that on the coach that you lose two key defensemen and you still push Carolina in Game 7? I'm trying to connect the dots here in terms of how Cassie could prevent that, something like that from happening.
I don't think I referenced that Bruce could prevent that from happening. I think I answered the question to, you know, Kevin of some of the things that go into making the decision and why you might not have success, and they're all parts of that. Did you have a more direct question you'd like me to answer?
If you're healthy and you beat Carolina, do you think that you're still sitting here today and changing coaches? I mean, it just seems like the depth is an issue, but I don't know what coaching does to sort of fix that.
Well, hypothetically, if we had continued on in the playoffs and won the Stanley Cup, no, I probably am happy about the parade that we're on, and that's sometimes the margins. The margins, as you just referenced in the Carolina series, we knew that going in. They were really small. That was a really good hockey team, and you know, it would have taken us to execute. I don't think the depth of our lineup, you know, shone through 5-on-5 like they had for January, February, March. That's, you know, some of the issues that reared its head, you know, at an inopportune time. Attrition is part of the exercise. You know, when you lose those players, that's a difficult thing to overcome as an organization and a team. That I did not place on the head coach in terms of why they got injured or how they got injured. Just as I referenced, answered, you know, Kevin's question, and I tried to do my best to answer yours.
When you made the change with Bruce 6 years ago, 5 years ago, there was a fundamental change in play, going from Claude's philosophy to his philosophy. Do you think that's where you are now with this? You need a fundamental change in the way this team plays?
I don't think it's a fundamental change. I do believe there are some things that we need to continue to evolve at and incorporate. We had some open discussions, and the coaching staff every year does things on their own, as to how they want to play, and we talk about those openly and in a collaborative manner. And no different for our staff, be it scouts, be it analytics, be it myself, and the people that watch the team. How can we continue to evolve with the group that we have? Is the personnel capable of doing that? And what are the other? I mean, I don't think it's a pure copycat league, but what are other teams doing better than we're doing? And vice versa. Other teams look at us and say, well, they do this pretty well. They've copied and changed. Coaches collaborate around the league. I mean, let's be honest, they do. And they pick each other's brains. I just spent time with Team Canada watching a coaching staff that were highly competitive with each other pick each other's brains. And how do they continue to evolve? And I don't think we're going to be any different in trying to incorporate some of those things in areas of our game that. Now, you're going to ask the new coach, you look at the personnel, I'm going to get feedback from coaches that I'm going to interview. What is this group capable of doing, and how the stylistic tweaks that you had to make? There were some significant changes in our game when Bruce took over. And I think we benefited from it. And to a large degree, and I'm hopeful that a new coach bringing in will have the proper tweaks as well.
I know you and I have disagreed on this in terms of team toughness, individual toughness. You think it's had enough, I don't. What do you think today?
I mean, I don't think we've ever disagreed in having team toughness. I think I played for a lot of teams that had team toughness. I played for teams that didn't, and you're exposed. I do believe that you absolutely categorically need team toughness across the board. And I think, watching Colorado, McDermott hasn't played the entire playoffs. So when you're talking about having an element, whereas Reeves, again, I'm referencing two, individual players that define what you may be describing. And it's just a mindset of your team that has to have it. There are pockets of the season and certain opponents, I will reference to, and specifically, the two games against Nashville last year were hard-nosed games. Nashville led the league in fights by a wide margin. I don't think that we were lacking in team toughness and a response in any way, shape, or form in either one of those games, outside of when Bergeron got popped and whether or not our team responded as appropriately as they could. That being said, that next game against Nashville, I think they did respond, and that's what I reference as team toughness. And I think I'm completely siding with you in the fact that I think it's necessary for our marketplace and our identity of our hockey club that we have it.
Were you tough enough in the playoffs?
Yeah, unfortunately, we took more penalties than Carolina, which at times is puzzling, but that's how it played out. We got hurt. We had guys get hurt. Grizzlick left that series. McAvoy, left for COVID, but also got injured in that series. And Lindholm left that series. I don't know if that's toughness. Maybe it's just bad luck in that sense. I want that in our team, but I don't want to trade it off for skill and speed. I want a balance. Thanks very much.